contact Anna to remind her if she seemed interested.
Well, I was thinking about it, but today was the last day and I thought, I'm gonna try to get this done. Project.
And then totally spaced it out.
No, I'm not talking about it.
I didn't change, but I didn't have that.
I have a rare
Would you like hot water? You ready to get started? So good?
Like maybe,
Good evening, folks. Thank you for coming tonight. My name is Jessica Bagwell. I am the Secretary Treasurer of the Wyoming Archeological Society, the local chapter, which is the Pumpkin Buttes chapter. We are lucky enough to have a guest speaker here tonight named Donovin Sprague. Donovin is an extremely accomplished speaker, author, historian, artisan, and musician. He's a Minneconjou Lakota and Cheyenne history faculty and outreach member of Sheridan College, and many other places. And he is going to speak to us this evening about the Winter Long Count. So we're very lucky to have you. Thank you very much for coming this evening.
Thank you very much. Good to see all you folks there. Some of you have to squint to see way back there. But, I hope you pick up some history from my program here. I guess my title is University Instructor, Author, Historian. I also wrote 10 books. I'm an author, so a lot of times when I travel to places, get a book signing, ends in a book signing promotion thing as well too. But my Lakota name is Chinkahu Wakantia, and that translates actually when General Nelson Miles asked one of the interpreters about my grandfather. He said that's his name, and Miles said, "What is that? What does that mean?" And they said, "Well, that's buffalo hump." It translates to the hump on the buffalo. So where the buffalo gets his strength and power and energy. So I'm only the third one that had that official name, and it translates to high backbone. But there were two famous ones, and we're from the today it's called Buffalo Hump finally, and then it went to Chief Hump. So you'll find Hump's name in all the Crazy Horse books. We're part of the Crazy Horse family. And the first Hump, my great-great-great-grandfather raised Crazy Horse. And that was, he was the uncle of Crazy Horse. And Crazy Horse's mother, his biological mother, died when he was a very young boy. And you're never like an orphan in the native world. It's uncle's job to step in. So that's why you'll see his name in all the Crazy Horse books. Yet there's no books on them except for mine that's coming out. It's been done for 6 years. It's called How to Crazy Horse, a Lakota Cheyenne history from a family view. And so what I've done is the oldest winter counts, which these winter counts are drawing on the hide of most of the year. My book starts in 1680, so that's the oldest entry that I found on winter counts. And then, not sure, like in the long or old title as it used there, it's just winter count. There's not a, but anyway, it ends about 1900. My book, 1910. So I always wondered as a kid that, why don't winter counts hit? And that was kind of sad because that was the surrenders and the men quit keeping the history. They just quit. It's now time to go to the reservation and make it in the early days. So they quit using those, and that's why it all ended. So the buffalo were ending them too. You know, we thought at one time a lot of these books back in the day were like big vanishing buffalo, and they actually did think that both those would, disappear, at some point there. So the work that I do, I hope I'm honored to have any archaeologists or historians here or geologists, kind of in all of those areas. And my work involves work what's called the Tribal Historic Preservation Officers. And there's a name for them, TIPOs, THP. And every U.S. federally recognized tribe have an office. And so now the law is like federal governments, like the U.S. Forest Service, BLM, some of them, if they find like remains, human remains in that, they're obligated to contact that tip office. And they go out, look at that and try to determine what should be done if, there's going to be a road built through that area and whatnot. So the last TIPO meeting that I was at was over at Buffalo, 6 months ago. Christmas was not that. And there were many tribes from this whole region that were there. So I'm from the Cheyenne River Sioux tribe, and of course I work with our tribe as well. I'm the tribal historian, even though I'm not in residence there, and also a tribal archivist, where I handle the archives. And not too long ago, I had an office over there and did all that. So now I'm back with I've always been pretty much with the universities. Been with the Iowa State, University of Iowa, Northern Iowa. Done some graduate work with studies with you here. I actually taught in Gillette here, and we had a partnership with Black Hills State where I was at, and they were all people working on education or master's degree in history and education. Our campus down by the older McDonald's now. Then you come back about a block. There used to be a subway there. It's on the left side, and it's kind of a split level building, strip mall type thing, because they always parked in the back and they would go in the basement. But anyway, I was over there, and now I'm at Sheridan College. I've just completed my 5th year over there. And so with the Cheyenne River Sioux tribe, we are one of the 7 Lakota bands. We were just talking about that. Somebody asked me what it's Mini Koju. Somebody put an N in there back in the day, and everybody started calling it the Mini Kanjo after that. But it's Koju, and it's planters by the stream. So there are 7, even though the French have other names, there are 7 Lakota bands. The Oglalas are the most famous at Pine Ridge, and then there's the Sichongu at Rosebud. The French call them the Brûlés. Yet one of the reservations, they pronounce it Lower Brule. So, and then there's Hunkpapa, is Standing Rock. That's where Sitting Bull's tribe, Sitting Bull, Rain in the Face, Gall, some of those. And then the other 4 at my reservation, the Cheyenne River, and it's Mini Koju and Sihasapa. Itazit Mini Koju. So we're going to have a test over those 7 names later. So let's, I want to go through some of the winter count stuff first, then share some history with you and some local stuff, as well. So this is there's no picture of my great-great-great-grandfather that I carry that name now. It was a name I had to earn through several years of history and record keeping and all that. So my great-great-grandfather, Hump, is on the left there, and he's got a hat there that the hat band says Hump. And so the ladies here are sisters from the Cheyenne. So in our family, all the men married into the Cheyenne tribe. And these gals are from the Dull Night family. We call them Morning Star. And that's why all these camps are together. They say, oh, the Lakota over here, then the Cheyenne moving in over here. And, it's all one big family is what it is, you know, they're all together. And my great-great-grandmother is right here, and her sister, and this is a 1879 picture. It's right 3 years after the Battle of Little Bighorn. And this Hump, the second one, the son, is or was equally as famous as his father with Crazy Horse. And some of the things that he did is he led or participated in several of the battles on up and down the Bozeman Trail that we can talk about. And he fought on the Custer Hill at the Little Bighorn. And I think it was Walter Camp recorded. I've seen it written once, but he recorded that he had the largest band of anybody had at the battle there. And so we have a lot of stories about all that. Walter Camp interviewed him in the early 1900s. And then he was a ghost dancer as well. And so he's involved like during the Wounded Knee era. So what I have then with the winter count is, and I can't disclose too much about this because of the unpublished book, but my sources in the book then, instead of, okay, they'll say at the university, presses, they say, well, that's great history, but what book is it in? You got to have a footnote, and your source. And I said, well, we didn't have any books. So my source is this winter count. Oh, so that's the way that works then with winter counts. So I'm just showing you a few things, and a winter count is pretty basic, a small drawing, and usually not so much detail as some of the other things later. It's more of a quick jot of that. And one of the best books, I think they have it across in the museum, is The Year the Stars Fell. And that has all the winter counts that the Smithsonian has. So we've even done that with schools, even kids, like we'll say, well, instead of making the most important event of the year, let's do one for the week. Let's do Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, what was the most important thing? Because sometimes we can't even remember, last Monday, what we had for supper, or, And so the Ogallala Sioux tribe, I'm working with them right now, and one of their artists in residence, they're Mr. Two Bulls, and they want to revive this record keeping again for the modern world. So anyway, the world doesn't know that this exists. This is Hump's winter count, and this one is was redone at some point because they're on hide, buffalo hide or deer, and the hide will disintegrate at some point. And this is on muslin, and so oftentimes they would be in the middle of the hide and in the center, and then they would work out counterclockwise and go out, and then on the outside edge it'd be like 1900 there, the most recent. And that's the only thing, in our world everything goes clockwise. That's the only thing I know that goes backwards. See, we're backing up in time, we're going backwards. So I use a lot of this in my book, and some of the entries, I'll just read a little bit about it. And this place, this could be, before I discovered it, it could be seen, but people didn't know what it was. They didn't know whose it was. And then there's ways I immediately identified it. And then the narrative part, with when we find these, a lot of times you don't get the historical record with that. Like we had one that was years later, they found all the drawings, what they meant. Somebody wrote them down, first in Lakota language, and then later translated. So I'll just read you a little bit about this. It's the owner is Hump, who lived from 1850 to 1908, and it's 1786 to 1877, And this winter count followed another winter count from our tribe, another historian keeper, that it only took me about a day of a whole afternoon anyway to translate all of these, because it was so close to the other guys. They draw them differently, you know. But some of the tribes represented in here, events or whatever, are the Cheyenne, Apsalata, Pro, we call them Kongi, Shoshone, Arapaho, Kiowa, Arikara, Mandan, Hidatsa, Rovan, Blackfeet, Assiniboine, Nez Perce, Ponca, Pawnee. So it's all of history from some of them. And then the winter counts, this one here, instead of going in the circle, they go this way here. It starts here as the oldest, from the 1700s, goes over to here, and then it drops down here. So that's the way it's followed, like that. And we just mentioned too, we were visiting here, and there is a recording of smallpox in this one too. We just mentioned that a lot of times you've seen a person with red dots all over them, and that was smallpox infection, which was real bad for the Mandan, Arikara, and Hidatsa tribes, our neighbors on the Missouri River, but we weren't as affected by this. So a lot of important history with all this, and some of the entries here. And then there's another kind of drawing that comes into place. And what that drawing is like people would draw a series of events that went on. And one of the real valuable ones for our tribe it's called A Pictographic History of the Ogallala Sioux, and it's Amos Badhart Bull. And his drawings are actually buried with him. And then in France, they made a first run of those. And that book is now republished. And the first drawings that were made are over at Chadron, Nebraska, with the Mary Sandoz Center over there. And I'm a member of that. It's the anniversary of her book too, the Crazy Horse, Strange Man of the Ogallalas. She was the author of one of the early books there. And so then you get a history of several events going. And so that time period for Badhart Bull stuff is 1850s. So when we find stuff that's that old written on ledger and all that, that is about the oldest right now. One of the local things that is dated from that period, even just I think a couple years earlier than Badhart Bull, is the drawings that were found in a book. It's published now by a friend of mine, Castle McLaughlin, and it's called A Lakota War Record from the Battle of the Little Bighorn. And it really doesn't have nothing to do with the Little Bighorn, but I think they put that name in there to sell books sometimes. But what that was a book that was found over on the, back in the day, they figure it came off of the California Gold Rush, the Mormon Trail, and it was taken from settlers who might have been killed or something in battle. But anyway, this book ends up after the Battle of the Little Bighorn, they called it a funerary teepee, and there's this teepee, and there were some of our dead in there, and they had a circle. Their feet was all like a clock all that way, and they went in, and over in the corner was this book, and so it wasn't a history of the Little Bighorn because it just happened. Anyway, in this book, they got to looking at it. It's all drawings of ledger art, you know, where they draw right over something. And so this book was very valuable, and it was real interesting to me because they identified 4 or 5 different artists in there. They call them artists A, B, C, and D. And so they think that a lot of the drawings, based on what they're doing, were over like Fort Phil Kearney, Fetterman, Wagon Box fight, that time period. And then they think that the author believed that most of them were, the majority were done by Hump, my grandfather, and that some were even done by Crazy Horse. So this display, we went on a display at the Peabody Museum in Boston, and it was on the main floor. It was so interesting to people. It was on the main floor of the museum for 9 years. That's what you've seen when you walk in. So the 9th year, I had to get over there and see it, and so I made it over there and got to see it then. The book is only about this big, and then the drawings. So they enlarged the drawings, you know, into that was the bulk of the display. So different ways we record history, you know, from the winter counts and accounts like that on the trails and travels. And Lewis and Clark met our people over on the Missouri River in 1804, 1805. And they keep journals, so they keep records. Our names are in there. And then about 1832, George Catlin come along. And he had a little commission, like he would come through a Missouri River. He painted tribes all over the country. So this is our family member here. His name is One Horn. And that's the generation before Hump. And that's the first Hump's brother. So anyway, what Catlin said, this is a George Catlin drawing, he said, I'm going to draw him because he's the head leader of the Minnekoju division. And then it was over by Fort Pierre on the west bank of the river, there was a herd of buffalo there and milling around. And so he went over there, One Horn, and he took off kind of trotting and then running, and the herd took off running full speed. With him running full speed, he was about, they're all known for their height, and he's about 6'3". The first Hump was 6'5", and then we have some, I'll probably show you here, that went into 7 feet. And I have several 7-footers in our family from that today. But Catlin said, I'm going to draw One Horn first because he put on this show and he ran the buffalo down, the biggest one, and he drew out his bow and arrow and killed the buffalo right there in a display. So his summary in a lot of the books of Catlin, he'll say, One Horn, Minnekoju, could run down a buffalo on foot and drive an arrow into his heart. That's how he explained it. So, and then Lewis and Clark would be before this. And Lewis and Clark met our family member, Black Buffalo. And if anybody's from the South Dakota, Black Buffalo is a real important name of a native in history. And he's the one who tried to take the boat away from Lewis and Clark down there. They had the differences, and anyway, Lewis and Clark kind of feared for their lives, and they pushed off from the bank, and they went on up to the next reservation. Those reservations end, but they went on upriver to the Grand River there, and they befriended the Mandan there. Lewis and Clark spent the whole winter there. They picked up Sacagawea as a guide right there, and so they were glad to get out of our country area, and they came on through the Yellowstone and eventually, clear to the Pacific, one side and back on the other side. And a thing too, I'm just thinking with history and genealogy, I mean, a lot of the world doesn't even know some of this stuff, but some of our families trace back, like the family tree, they trace back to the oldest, furthest back they could go was Meriwether Lewis in their family. So you don't read about all that in their journals. They kept kind of day-to-day journals, but not every day. And they would say, well, we're going on the Lakota, they're carrying us on a blanket. We're going in, they're gonna host us, and there's no word for a few days, and you know, but they were doing a little bit more than, you know, public relations. So some things, and I studied pictures and winter counts, and the winter counts are pretty simplified, you know, not so dramatic art. But the other guy who drew a lot of our people was Karl Bodmer, German guy from this time period. So we studied their dress and that, and this opened up one of my first book on Cheyenne River photo book, because it was an old picture. And some of our elders, and they said, well, we didn't wear our hair that way. That's been the way we wear our hair. And Catlin was real meticulous. He drew what he seen. And he recorded that One Horn's hair came clear down to the ground. It was that long. And so they wrapped it up like that. So in my research, I found that all these people were a member of, it's called the Ashkeo band. And the Ashkeo was an elite warrior band, and that translates to they wrap their hair. That's what Ashkeo means. And there's still some down at Rosebud of those Sichongu that are members of that, and some from our tribe. And then he said he's wearing this here, this epidermis piece from, he said it's a tip of the buffalo horn. So Catlin's writing about that. He said, where did he get that? It was a gift from his father. And he said his father was Black Buffalo. See, what they're doing is they're giving our family tree, is what they're doing. And see, we can tell that and say, my grandfather was Black Buffalo or whatever. Okay, you got to have a book, you know. Okay, well, these guys got it, you know, so that's our proof. Several years ago, not over 10 years ago, I guess, Fort Pierre had a big celebration. And they honored about 7 families through the history of Fort Pierre, and 2 was actually from my family. And so I could have rode on either float they had. But one was the Black Buffalo was honored, and the other one was Fred Dupree, my grandfather, who was saved the buffalo. And my hometown is named for the Dupree family, Dupree. For any rodeo people, Casey Tibbs was another one that was honored there. So anyway, back to this drawing here, and I'm looking at all the decoration and that, and I'm kind of puzzled about that. A gift from his father, Black Buffalo. So when a buffalo strikes something, they can leave that in like a tree area or something, and that regrows, you know, if they're fighting or whatever. And so anyway, here's a story for you. Got to have some humor. The Sturgis Motorcycle Rally was on in the Custer State Park. There was some bikers going through with the many buffalo, and there was one big buffalo there that they should have waited for. And the last guy wanted to keep up with his bunch, so he was maneuvering around that big buffalo. And as he did that, the buffalo can just spin on their heels. And that buffalo spun and throwed him a 1,600-pound Harley Davidson and the man like a toy in the air. And the man, and I got the article, ended up on the front page of the Rapid City Journal. And the man was in the hospital bed and wasn't too injured, you know, his ego a little bit. But anyway, he's holding that piece just like that. That epidermis was surgically removed from, guess where? His behind. So I said, he could be the poster child for not petting those buffalo or getting too close. But anyway, that's some of the research, you know, that comes about from these photos. And I won't go through the entries here. He's a guy from our tribe too. Spotted Eagle had a large following. And by the way, this picture and the one of my grandfather Hump are both L.A. Huffman photos from Montana. He's a well-known photographer. And Huffman did a lot of cowboy and ranch stuff, you see around in places. And then that's also where Hump surrendered, was Tongue River Cantonment. That's Miles City. That's General Miles headquarters up there. So this is in the Winter Count. So people have to know who the Humps are first, and to get my book out, because people called them the greatest leaders, warriors they ever had. It's in Black Elk Speaks. Black Elk said, "Oh, we got great people like Crazy Horse, but even before that, we had people like High Backbone Hump, that were way up there, and they were headmen. What I've been showing you, headmen, leaders, where you're born into that. Crazy Horse himself was not from a headman family, and he had to earn everything like that. He was from a common man family, but he rose to the great heights just through his feats, that he became the great person that he was. So yeah, there's some of this in a book. This would also be, the pictures would go with them, and so it can be a book itself. This would be a big, important book. You're only about maybe three groups who have ever seen this Winter Count, because the book, I'm making an index for it. That's after I'm done shuffling everything around and finally do an index. And I felt like an accountant there for a long time, moving stuff, and then your footnotes all go, crazy on you. So anyway, this is my great grandparents on the other side. This is Fred Dupree, and this is Good Elk Woman, the Minnie Koshu, and the grandfather. And about a year ago, they had the Dayton Duncan and Ken Burns did the documentary on the buffalo, and this picture was in there. And so Dupree was one of those recognized. He was the first inductee into the National Buffalo Association Hall of Fame, and he's also in the South Dakota Hall of Fame. And then from there, our neighbor to the south was Scotty Phillip, a guy named Scotty Phillip, and he bought the herd. And Phillip, South Dakota is named for him. And then they went to Custer State Park, and then that one got Henry and throwed that biker. That was later. So anyway, the women got no credit. So in my book, these women were the ones. It was their idea to save the buffalo, capture calves. And I always wondered what a Frenchman would know about the sacredness of a buffalo. And same way with Scotty Phillip, he was from Scotland, and his wife was Cheyenne, was Sarah Larrabee. She's one of those 4 Larrabee girls, one of them who ended up with Crazy Horse when he surrendered at the Red Cloud Agency. So anyway, I collect old pictures, and there's a classic example of a Winter Count there, entries here, and then working out to the outside part. Just recently, I was honored to have Christine Burke. She's from consultant. Like me, she works with the Smithsonian a lot, doing consultant work. And she wrote a lot of the stuff that's in the year the stars fell. And there's a book called Infinity of Nations I worked on too, Smithsonian. But all that stuff is in the George Hay Center in New York City. It's on the main floor. If you ever wanted to Google Infinity of Nations, you can take a tour through it right there instead of going over to Battery Park and Freedom Towers and seeing that. So these are some entries here. So eventually these would be translated here. This one here is another person's Winter Count, and you can see just the one image. So the most important event here was the death of my great-great-great-grandfather, Hump, was killed in the Wind River Mountains in a battle with the Shoshone. And it's in all the Crazy Horse books. Crazy Horse was there, and then we have personal stories of that. but that's what that records there. And they say 1870, 71. So they also, the Shoshone, give him a haircut over there too during that deal. So high backbone, and if you see the years like that, that's why, because our year starts different. It starts in the spring. So if a winter count looks like it's off, it'll be off by 1 year. That's the reason. So I just want to say then, so historians then bring him back to fight at the Little Bighorn, 1876, right? Is the Bighorn is the 150th next year. A lot of big activities scheduled in this whole area for the 150th. I was one of the speakers at the 125th. It don't seem like it was that long ago. Joe Medicine Crow was up there with me at Apsolica. So anyway, you can see 1876 was the battle. So how could he be fighting at the Little Bighorn? What, they resurrect him? So that's an area where authors don't pay enough attention, see, to that stuff. So who it was his son, Hump, and he's 26 years old, right in his prime. And I showed you the picture of him. He's the one there. So this one here is a classic one here, following year by year. And I'm trying to go into some local, stuff here too. We have such a huge area that we covered. This 1865, many horses died off. So it was a rough winter. You can see the trees here laden. And then this one here is the next year, 1866. 100 white men were killed. That's what they reported. That's the Fetterman fight, Fort Phil Kearny. 1867, they surrounded the white tents. What do you think that might be? They surrounded the white tents. It's not far from here. Wagon box, good. Wagon box fight. The next year, 68, they traded many mules. Fort Laramie Treaty. Old woman was killed by a tree. This was gathered a lot of mystery, and I found what this is for my book. It's in my book, and it's part of the story is Crow Lakota battle, and right into our camp, and the location is right in Sheridan. This is another person's entry for Hump death in 1870. There's a bullet right there traveling towards him. That's how that person recorded that. So you can see, these entries. These are all from one person and the most important event of the year. Now these here are the Bad Heart Bull drawings, how he does several different things here. And so this here says, that's my Lakota name there, only they spelt it wrong. Chanku Wakantia, that says high back road. Chanku is road, so little, air, what the heck. They got the high backbone, right? So he led this battle here with the Crow. And then some other history that they wouldn't know about this. In color, he's got a red, bright red cape. And they say, what? Superman. Oh, no, red cape. And horses rearing up there. But where this came from was when we had Kiowa presence in this whole area over at the Bear Lodge and this region here and Black Hills. And this was a lot of Kiowa country in early days, in the 1700s. And finally, the Lakota run them out to the south. And during the last time that they exited out of there over by where Hot Springs, South Dakota is, on the south end of the Black Hills, my grandfather took that cape from one of them, their chief guy, And so he proudly wears that. So it's not a good thing to be defeated and then have the enemy wearing your regalia, regalia. So he paraded back and forth there with that cape at that time. And then that was the last we ever seen of the Kiowa up there. They told him not to come back. There's hunting here and things. You're better off down south. Whatever. So this is 1856. This is why I say some of the earliest drawings. And then that war record book. Some more events there. And once you see the character in some of these, you can pick them out. Like Crazy Horse is in here. What this is a series of battles running through this area here, Powder River, and the Crow are coming here chasing the Lakota, and then we make a stand, and then the next series of many photos, they're chasing them back the other way. So I said, like another day at the office, between us and the county. Now, hey, one of Hump's wives was a Crow, so I get along with them. They say, how are you guys today? Are you still enemies? And, they weren't all fighting, they're marrying. So he took her in captive, and she never tried to run away. And so I have a family tree for them as well. They all got enrolled. They're Minnekoju and Cheyenne, or Crow, but they got enrolled as Oglalalas because they settled down there and got enrolled down there. I'll just use an example. They survived Wounded Knee Massacre in 1890. Hump's son stands by, and then the woman is Thunderhawk Woman from Standing Rock, Hunkpapa, and they marry. They settle at Pine Ridge. Now the agent comes by, says, well, you're not Pine Ridge here. You're at Cheyenne River. You belong up there, and she belongs at Standing Rock. I'm going to send you back. And they said, no, we like it here. Here by Red Shirt Table and Lone Man School, some of those big suburbs of Pine Ridge today. You'd have to be lost if you know where those are at. But anyway, he said, we help out wherever we're at the agencies. And so the agent said, well, we'll let you stay, but you're getting the name Helper for her last name. So they started the Helper name, and then they are enrolled as Oglalas. See, they're not Oglala at all. This is another one too. This summary is Hump here. It says something about that it was definitely his day, that he was on a roll, kind of. And he got his Wotawe, is kind of like his mojo or whatever. This stuffed bird was his mojo, working good that day. Just some examples. Sioux Crow fights, the way those are, these drawings. And these are all places, events. A lot of this is right through this area here where we're at. So then if I could pull up another one here, these are like counting coup. You have that coup stick, and it's more honorable to touch the enemy and get away than harm them. And what you want to get away with, though, is their horses. That was the prize. Hit their horses, knock them off their horse, or get that lady. Away they go. And then it's time for them to come back and return the favor, so you better be on the lookout. So there was a time when a lot of our people, in the 1800s, there was a time when we spent more time, like say in, this was a big area that we covered, the Sioux, they call them, Lakota Nakota. And we always have to remember that we're one of the largest tribes in America and always had the high number population. So these other tribes in the history were very small, Arapaho, Crow, Cheyenne, compared to our numbers. So we had stuff going on all over in Nebraska, in Minnesota, in the Dakotas, in the Powder River country. And so by 1850, the Humps decided to kind of, not permanently, because they're always moving, following the buffalo, but the main camp area ranged from Miles City, that's where he surrendered, to Dayton. So that was the camp, that's the Tongue River there. And that was kind of the central headquarters area there. And they had to put that blockage up there to keep the Crow up there, because in these winter counts, here they are down in the Black Hills. They can't get into our Black Hills. That's like being right in home, in our door, our window, coming in our house. So to keep them at bay, that's when that presence was made up there. And so that's why some of our family were all born on the Tongue River, up in there. So more honorable to touch the enemy and get away. And this guy's from our family as well. His name is Touch the Cloud. So as he grew, he was about 6'9", some said 6'10", even some books said 7 foot. But I think from the research he was about 6'9". So as he grew, Touch the Cloud. His son Amos Charging was 5'9", his biological son. And then the next generation, boom, 6'5", back up there. So we have some, I have some nephews in Kansas, 7'2". And I just had a picture taken, it's with the Winter Count guy. We're reviving the Winter Count at Pine Ridge, the Two-Bulls guy, he's from our family too. There's a picture of me and him, and so I'm telling all these people, I'm saying, they hadn't met me. I said, I'm really a little guy, I'm really small and short, if you knew me. And so I showed him that picture there, and I hit Marty about right here. He's 7'2". So yeah, good basketball players every other generation, I'd say. This is an image of Crazy Horse. His horse was injured. And that's the cover of the war record book that's over in Peabody. This is my grandfather, Hump, went to Washington after they surrendered. He still didn't speak English, and this guy, Andrew Traversey, is translating for my grandfather there. We actually married into this family later years. Ilamia. So I have one more. If maybe I could get some help here to set that up while I talk about some other things here. How do we back this up, Robert, to that other one? So any questions that you have up to this point here? That's right. Yeah. Yes, in the middle there.
Did you guys play a big part in World War I?
Yes, we did. That's a very good question, because I travel actually throughout the world, and the U.S. military has booked me into places like the Army and the Air Force and different places like that. And I have a program about our veterans, because no ethnic group in America has a higher rate. 50% of American Indians are veterans of U.S. wars, like with World War I and World War II. That's the greatest thing, man or woman, to be a warrior today. So we're very proud of that. And we don't want nobody messing with our country. is the United States of America. That's the bottom line. Okay, this here is to show some other local things here. See if they would have, there was talk, it wasn't, it was really a lie, but there was talk of having Crazy Horse have an agency, which in the Powder River country, which could have even been centered about Gillette, you know, if you wanted to do the central area, because if you look at the 1868 treaty, they drew those boundaries, see, which that's where the 5 Sioux reservations ended up. Pine Ridge, Rosebud, Standing Rock, Cheyenne River, and Lower Brule, all in South Dakota, removed from this area. But the unceded area out here was a big chunk, and Gillette would be about the center of that. So this shows some of the some events here, and so what this is here is a Powder River and Sawyer expedition through here. So I've covered, you know, a lot of areas of this. A lot of this originates, if you can't read all that, these routes are coming through from Nebraska, the Niobrara, and there's Sawyer's kind of civilian and road builder and all that, and so he comes in through Wyoming, and then with that part of the picture, Pumpkin Butte, you know, and the Pumpkin Butte was a strategic lookout area that we had there, and then there's also Buffalo Jump there as well for slaughtering buffalo and putting up meat and all that, and some of that, you know, predates, you know, even Lakota, you know, but I'm talking about this time period of 1865, and the translation of that is like a squash or gourd like butte, and so the pumpkin part was mistranslated. So yeah, just a lot of history here. And I know some of you may have been on some field trips with some of this. You know, a lot of the history comes to play here up on Caballo and Bone Pile Creek, some of those areas. And, you know, we have a lot of, you know, information and some, you know, pictures anyway of items that were collected there. Those rifle pits, I think, are pictured here. So, and as you know, that's private land, you know, so you have to get permission to do all that. But I was just at one of the locations there yesterday of Sawyer and Connor. I took my students to Ranchester, so we were up there. So the base of operations here was Fort Connor, down about 30 miles east of KC, becomes Fort Reno. That's kind of the central area where all these are coming and going from. And this Powder River expedition came about right after the Platte Bridge and the Battle of Red Buttes fight, and that's over at Casper. So another video, we won a Spur Award for that. If you want to Google on YouTube, the Battle of Red Buttes, we're in that video. It's pretty recent. So right after that, that story there begins with our camps were over in where the Dull Knife battle took place later, over in the hole in the wall area. Nobody could find that place until actually some of the Cheyenne told where they were at. They were friends with the soldiers, and that was the Dull Knife fight later. But that's where we started out, and then we made a trek down about where the Interstate 25 is, and tried to lure some of the soldiers out from Casper, the Platte Bridge there. It was, in a way, it was kind of like the Fetterman, where they try to lure soldiers out, but it didn't work over there. But anyway, I'm not going to go through that whole battle, but it was a very successful one for our people, Lakota and Cheyenne and some Arapaho. But it was decided after that by the U.S. that they would punish us for that Platte Bridge. And that's kind of the whole thing behind the Powder River expedition. We're gonna run, Walker and Cole and Connor and Sawyer and all these guys, and we're gonna send them up through the Powder River basin, right up through the Powder River itself, and then we're gonna go up the Tongue. Connor's over on the west side, and then there's another group that I won't go into because it's a little farther away from, not that far, but another group comes up through actually the Sand Hills area of Nebraska. They come up into the Black Hills, like Wounded Knee area, and up into Montana and Sundance area over there, Sundance, Weston County and all that. So they're around, and the goal is they're gonna all meet up here at a place called Panther Mountain, which is the Wolf Mountains. The Wolf Mountains are a big range, so this meeting never happens. They don't know how big the territory is out here, and nobody meets up there. They eventually give up and go back down and retreat back to the fort again. And that's the end of the Powder River expedition. It was a great victory from the way our tribes looked at it and all that. And when it was all over, a lot of the soldiers were kind of mustered out from service because they had been in the Civil War and all that. But, there's quite a story of events, which I'm not going to go through all of that. I'd like to share or hear some of your history too, if you've been over to Bone Pile and places like that. And they camped over there, and there's some books on that. There's a good book on Cole, and there's one on Connor that I have, which is pretty much a day-to-day diary. Some of these people, they have newspaper correspondence with them too, another primary source of information. Okay, let's, one of the chapters in there is for Gillette in this area here was what was it called? The damnedest country they had ever seen or something. Is it just the environment punished them? They were the only rule or orders was punish the tribes, and they ended up being punished by the environment. They couldn't handle it, and these tribes are just thriving. They're everywhere. They're coming in, attacking. Every other day something's going on. So out here they'll make a move over to Powder River and come back over to Pumpkin Butte, and they run into some of our people over there. So I don't have too much in that area. I've worked on names in that, but after the event in my book that's right before this is of course Platte Bridge and Red Buttes. So right after that in July 1865, they go back to the hole in the wall area, and then they come into Powder River, and the main camp then is back to Dayton. That's where they usually retreat to, and then when they came out for the treaties, that's where they found them. They found Crazy Horse and Hump out there. But one guy who did give some names was George Bent. So he's a source. He even was a source for the Platte Bridge in that. He said, he was married into the Cheyenne. He said, hey, I'm observing right now about it's 900 or 1,000 people in this Hump and Crazy Horse band that's heading down that way. But as far as we know, he didn't know our family, and they were kind of leery of any mixed blood too, of even being around him. But he did mention Red Cloud here, and he did mention Dull Knife being here, during this parlay that they had here in Campbell County. And so, but they wouldn't know things like Hump's wives were Dull Knife, from Dull Knife family. There's about all they got on the women was wife. They didn't name them and stuff like that. There was just the man's name, and same way with a lot of the tribal people, they would mention the man's name, say like Wooden Legs Count or something of the Cheyenne, and it's just wife, you know, and it's kind of like their protocol and etiquette. It's not their business to know too much about the man's wife and his family and all that. There's respect there. Let's see, what else here? So here's the Fort Connor. Anybody been over there? All right. It's a nice place. Pumpkin Butte in the background to the east. And then the other location here, if you've been over there, you've probably been to the site of the Crazy Woman battle over there. And I've been over there with some of the archaeologists. Let's see, the guy from the BLM, him and I went over there. And then with some of this stuff too, you know, George Frizen, I know George, he's lived in Sheridan and he passed away. Studied a lot of, you know, petroglyphs and all this stuff, everything in Wyoming. And another guy I knew was Glenn Sween from Sheridan, historian, and he did a lot of stuff. And of course, Joe Medicine Crow. So a lot of my stuff is, you know, petroglyphs. And then Lene Sundstrom, she's a good friend of mine. She's an expert on carvings, petroglyphs. Drawings and stuff, and she has a big book on those. And then, of course, you know, earlier stuff, you know, the critters and, you know, paleontology. My wife likes those, she calls them gems, but I call them rocks, but we cross paths there. So anyway, that's the base of operation. So time period also, there's the buttes there, Pumpkin Buttes. And then this is some of the scatter here of the rifle pit areas. There's Bent and his wife accounts from them. They held a meeting. Some more stuff found over there. So I have a book on this. This is Connor, who's in charge of this. They'll build the fort in called Fort Connor, and then they name it Reno later. And it's not Reno from the Little Bighorn either. Everybody thinks, oh yeah, Reno, he's that with Custer. It's some more unknown Reno who was a soldier from the east, Boston or somewhere. This shows Connor's route. All of this is through this area here, Pumpkin Buttes. And then it's dated, day to day, so it's all in sequence as they go. Connor will come out eventually after they do the whole Gillette thing and Bone Pile and moving further west. Their goal is to get over closer to the fort area, and they go to Fort Reno, Fort Connor, and when Connor leaves to go to like Ranchester, I think they're 3 days behind. So they follow in camps. They go to some of the same camps that we were yesterday, like Clear Creek over at Buffalo. They find their camp there. And then Connor kind of went more out towards Decker, out in that area. And then he come in to Ranchester and made that attack on the unsuspecting Arapaho village over there. And then Sawyer, he comes up, he doesn't know, you know, what's happened and none of this, and they attack him. He's like, well, what did I do, you know? Well, he had them all stirred up. Meanwhile, Connor's up there east of Lodgegrass, Montana. He's at the meeting site up there waiting, and nobody, like I said, nobody meets. The others are coming up through Powder, on the Powder River. There's a wagon wheel as far as like old things from the expedition. Anybody been in the Broadus Museum? There's a wagon wheel that was in the sand or whatever, sand barge like. And so they have that. And at one point, there's some stories of some wagons that I knew about too, but they couldn't positively place them there to that place. And then coming back is like a terrible thing coming back for the soldiers. Some are barefoot, and even out here at Pumpkin Butte, they're barefoot and cactus in their feet, and some of the books, rattlesnake in the bedroll, and a lot of hardship. A lot of hundreds and hundreds of horses died, starved, mules. This was an incredible big expedition of all these people. And coming back down, there was one story over, I think it was on the Powder, and there was a mule, one of their mules was stranded out on the sand barge there. I think it was north of that rest area over there by the interstate. And they had an argument. Finally, I think they flipped a coin or whatever to see who was going to get to eat that mule for breakfast. And so they were really had some hardship. So all these are maps here. This is Connor's route going up from Fort Connor up. This is Lake DeSmet right here, pretty much the Bozeman Trail up through Sheridan, and then he veers off towards Decker a little bit, then Manchester, and then Sawyer following. Sawyer's destination was over here, Virginia City, Montana, to get to the gold and silver fields. It was, and he had some military escort as well. This is Sawyer here. So he's one of your early people here in Campbell County. More maps. This is Cole. There were two, I showed them about where the graves were of the two people that were killed over there. The guy who was killed, this Cole, he was not the well-known Cole. That was one of the officers. The Sawyer's bunch is pinned down up here by Manchester for about 13 days. And they have their two wagons drawn there. And finally, Connor's up there, and he comes back to check on them, see what's going on, and he finds them. And that's the first they knew, Sawyer's bunch, that they had came through earlier and attacked the Arapaho. Jim Bridger was with them. He was getting to be an older fella about that time. One of the stories there too was way down, it must have been around Buffalo or somewhere, and he's seen smoke from the camp up there around, would have been between Manchester and Dave. City Park is the marker up there, although there's another place where a lot of the fighting took place. It's not all in that park. They scattered. But they wouldn't believe him, They said, well, he's getting old, and then the way it turned out, he was right. Later they get up there and he had seen the smoke from the Arapaho village. And they used binoculars and couldn't see it. Here's the fight on Tongue River then, up there. This is where I was yesterday. Sawyer's locations. Connor, Cole, and Walker. The end place, as far as some of them got, was up by Ashland, up in there, Ashland and Broadus. And then they come back. And for Connor, he wasn't over that far. He was more east of Lodgegrass area. outer river expedition. So a lot of this is coming back then the other way, retreating back. Here's the rifle pits, Caballo Creek. Anybody live there? This is north here. He was in charge of the Pawnee Scouts there. A lot of the tribes were puzzled. Who are these Indians? And they were mistaken for other people. But through that expedition coming from eastern Nebraska, they had Pawnee, they had Omaha tribe is there, Winnebago, they're really the Ho-Chunk. So they kind of imported all of them up here. So we had a lot of them to fight there. So anyway, that's just some of the history there, and I'd be glad to maybe answer some other questions of some of the work that I do. I know the tribal delegation, this was just recently, my brother sent a picture of me, of him, and he said, "Where am I?" And I said, "You're on Pumpkin Butte." He said, "Good guess." He was holding a projectile point. But a very key location there, and before it was so smoggy, you used to be able to see the Bear Lodge, Devil's Tower, and I seen where they said Bear Butte, but I think there's too many other things in there. I think they were talking about the Bear Lodge, but they said, and then further away you could see the Black Hills. Well, the Black Hills are really closer than Bear Butte. It's kind of tucked away. And then, of course, you could see clear out to Fort Connor, Fort Reno, and to Buffalo, to the Bighorns. And it's real interesting, some of these diaries that the soldiers read in the accounts out here, the hardships, but then the beauty of the land, if you're from this area, where I'm from is right on 212, my reservation, Dupree, named for the Dupree family, and I never did know my trees very well. People would say, "What kind of tree is that?" I don't know, but I know what a sagebrush is. We have a lot of open areas, and so today I live in Rapid City, and I've been at Sheridan for 5 years. They gave me a house over there to try to keep me on campus. I'm right on the house on campus, and they gave me a meal ticket, so I haven't missed too many meals either. And then I go to Indiana in the summer, and I have a place over there on the lake, and I work with the historic preservation officers over there on other tribes that were in that area that they don't know who they were. Well, anybody can find out who the tribes were, just by looking at some of the treaties. Most of them were in Oklahoma. And I worked down there. I worked with the Choctaw Nation for 3 years, and I have a Choctaw book as well, and then mostly the universities. But a lot of, if you wanted to Google the Infinity of Nations too, that was a project too that we wrote a lot about. And so a lot of tours that come in, for me, I do tours in the summer from Europe, and they'll see our stuff over there at that George Hay Center. That's the old Smithsonian, American Indian Smithsonian. It's connected with that. And so they say, "Well, I kind of know you a little bit because we've seen you over there on the video." And then also helped with the downtown in St. Louis. I think it was an expansion of the West, but now it's called the Archway Museum. It's the big one, the big fancy one. So we were also involved with that, with the telling the history. When they came to me, they said, "Well, we have a lot of the wagons going west story, but we need some more Indian part." So that's where you come in. So that's what I did, shared some stuff there. And so most of my work is in, archives and working with archaeologists and different people like that. So any other questions that you might have? Yes.
How far back can you go with Lakota? Can you start back as
Well,
streets or anything like that?
with my book, it's just a 1680. Nothing like archaeologists, but, and that goes to a lake in Wisconsin, northern Wisconsin. So I was up there and did research, and it was conflict between the Ojibwe, which are very prevalent there. And so there are some linguistic studies that Sioux or Lakota were in the Carolinas as early as 1500s. And there's a lot of movement and migration, and they're always trying to put a people in one spot and say, this is where they came from, this is where they dwelled. Well, people went east to west and north to south in every direction, you know. In the Black Hills, the Forest Service uses 30 different tribes use the Black Hills in up to permanent camps through the years. And that number goes up to, I understand, 45 for the bighorns. I was on the Black Hills National Forest Advisory Board. I worked with some of the superintendents here.
So none of the Cahokia people?
The what?
Cahokia? No, the Cahokia.
I would hate to rule certain groups out because just like Kennewick Man and stuff like that, the time clock keeps going back all the time, further, older. And in the universities, we always have to, we present the scientific theory, you know, oldest civilizations, where did mankind start, come from, Africa, Asia, the Bering Land Bridge theory, you know, when waters were lower, Russia to Alaska. And then I collect creation stories. Every tribe has a creation story, where they came from. And there's legends, and so you have to, oh yeah, that's kind of amusing. You don't give up, you know, it's not just all fiction and humor. There's going to be some things embedded in there. But most of them have something like a flood and a fire, which even correspond with like the Bible. And they say they originated here. So there's jokes now in Indian country that on the land bridge are going to say they were going that way. But it'll take a few years to push the clock back that far. I did find some in Alaska, a few in Alaska. I think in Nevada there was a group that said they used the land bridge and they were down in the Orient. And they have, like Eskimos, you know, have Aleuts, Inuits. Their eyes are different than ours, or slanted. Facial hair, we're not known for facial hair. They are, and so we think they were down in there, you know, they were part of that. And we don't say that they're not part of us, but, you know, it's kind of like the different breed of cat story, you know. It's like they're different, you know, than we are. And then there's stories, of course, Black Hills creation stories out of Wind Cave that breeds in, you know. And then they do the math part. No, you weren't here. You stole it from that tribe, and they stole it from some. That's one of the real problems there. That, you know, and then of course landowners that have it today, it's like, okay, now it's in its right hands, but you guys all, none of you had legal claim to it. Well, things didn't work that way. There was a different concept of land ownership, and land wasn't to be fenced; it was to be shared and communally used. And they planted in cycles, and they moved and left areas and came back and seasonal. And so for us, it became the buffalo. That was the life, was food, shelter, and clothing. And the teepee lodges are made out of that. And, you know, the buffalo was everything. Every piece was used, even the tail was a fly swatter for the woman in the teepee. And it looks like our women didn't have any say in the councils. It's all, yeah, men's council meeting tonight. women have no say. So woman did though, in every society, if you look at it deep enough. And they'd say, well, man, husband, you go in the council meeting, you better bring this up tonight because it's of interest to us women. And then if he doesn't do that, he comes back and all of his belongings are on the outside of the teepee. So they got the point across, and that's still not a good thing today. You come home and stuff's out like that. So they had their way. But, yes,
Oh, we've got some online questions.
okay.
So Mark Underwood is asking, he says, of the pond, remember the stone teepee rings that were evenly spaced apart? Do you have any idea when the teepee rings were placed and when they were used?
What they call teepee rings are for ceremonial, and it's usually kind of a common error to just call them teepee rings, you know. But we had stakes that held the teepee down, you know, and they didn't need those. But no, I don't have any dates on that as far as the time period.
Then next question, where can people buy your books?
This table. My books are in all the major chains in America, can be ordered, and they're the Images of America. Let's grab one. I wrote 10 books, and the first one was Cheyenne River. The second one was Standing Rock, so this has like, you know, Sitting Bull pictures, stuff like that. And then I did Pine Ridge, and then I did Rosebud, and then others followed, but that's the main Lakota ones right there. So yeah, I even seen some in Europe. So the Images of America, there might be one on Gillette, you know, photos. But it's kind of like some of mine are some of the really good sellers, like how many people from, we'll say, Cheyenne would buy the Billings book and vice versa. But mine opened it up because everybody knew who Sitting Bull was, you know. So it crossed all the boundaries. And then my unpublished big book, 33 chapters. I hope to have that done by the end of the year. Well, it's done. It's been done for 6 years. So anyway, hope to have that ready. And also I've done a lot of contributing author stuff, The Infinity of Nations and things like that. Thank you. Any other questions? Yes?
What legend did you have on Devil's Tower?
Oh, one of the Light Bull, he was at Little Bighorn. Over at the Visitor Center, they have some of his drawings or winter count stuff, and it says some good things like that's the Belle Fourche River wraps around that, and it also wraps around Bear Butte sacred area. And so with all of that, the camps were over there, and White Bull said the Minnekoju spent the whole winter there in camp with a large group right on that south side there. And so then in the story, children wandered off from the camp, and it looked like they were, you know, being chased. So here comes a bear, big bear is about to pounce on them. They're running towards the camp, and they dropped, and they prayed to the rock to be saved. And the rock sprang up and formed Devil's Tower, and an uplift, and carried them to the top. And some of the stories, a great eagle rescued them later to the bottom. But then they'll say, well, yeah, then there's the drawings have the bear clamped on the side. You've probably seen that. And he's shaping all of that. But see, the main theme of that is that they know the ground rose. And that's how it was formed, and upheaval. And that's the theme. So there's civilizations and people from long ago who have handed this oral tradition, history down in stories like that. So I tell my students, remember Mount St. Helens and the volcanic eruption there? I was at Black Hills State over there, well, I was in Spearfish, and we had soot from that on our vehicles. Maybe you did here too. But we went over there, and that's all altered, all those places and farms and ranches. It looks nothing like it did before. But see, native people have seen these changes. Sometimes they've recorded things in petroglyphs and drawings, or their stories, just like the creation stories. So then we have one on the Black Hills too. You know, they had a race around the Black Hills. All the four-legged ones and the winged ones, and all them had a race. The turtle was in there, and the buffalo and the deer and magpie, raven, all those were racing. And as they went around, they formed that what they call the racetrack depression all around the Black Hills. And then they have views of satellite 700 miles up, and it clearly shows that racetrack that we call around there. And then it also looks like a heart from way up in the satellite. So anyway, at the end of the race, finally, it looked like the buffalo was going to win. He had the endurance and power, was just setting in, you know. And here, you want to know who won the race, don't you? Okay, there was a magpie riding on his hump, and just as before they crossed the finish line, the magpie sprang forward, and the magpie won the race. So he's thinking up here, you know. So about everything. One time, this was just, this was a guy from Australia. He was at the Brenton Museum, and they had me talking to him, and he was asking all kinds of different questions, and I just realized when I was answering that we had a legend or story that went with everything he asked me that day. And I drew from storytelling like that. But sometimes it's like the people say, well, that ain't true, you know, the bear didn't get that big, you know, and they lose interest. But it's just to interest the listener or the reader, you know, and look for the main themes in there is what you look for. Everybody been to Black Hills, Wind Cave, breeze in and out? Any other questions?
Another online question. Did Buffalo Bill Cody ever cross paths with native groups that you know of?
Well, yeah, he did a lot with the Wild West show. So I'll tell you about a project we're just finishing up right now. It's a partnership. I was working with Clemson University and Oglala Lakota College. So what they wanted to do was research Buffalo Bill, and then the Sheridan House is there in Sheridan where I'm at. But they're looking for families from Pine Ridge, because a lot of his people that he used of native were at least from there. So the goal was to find families who had pictures or stories, and I actually found one guy, his name that I interviewed. I didn't interview him, but his descendants, John Y. Nelson. So you could look for him in the Wild West shows. He's all over the world. And his wife is Oglala, and then all the kids were in the Wild West show too. And so I got some stories, you know, about them that hadn't been seen or heard of before. Maybe some pictures too that have not been seen. So it's an interesting project to break ground there. You know, one thing that I added with that, we repatriate, we bring back ghost dance shirts. They say, well, how did it get in Berlin, London, Scotland, all those museums? Well, they were confiscated, or what happened with Buffalo Bill after Wounded Knee Massacre. Some of the people, of our people, they imprisoned them in Illinois for a while. Buffalo Bill came along. He said, well, I could do something with them. I put them in the Wild West show. So they were released to his custody, and that's how they got in the show. And some of them wore ghost dance shirts underneath their regular clothing. And some of them needed money when they got overseas, and they sold their shirts or gave them away, maybe gifts. So we had one from Cheyenne River that Marcella LeBeau went over and repatriated from Scotland, one of the ghost dance shirts. So with the, I want to say the final thing here, the surrenders that happened in our family. There were 5 up here to the north on the Owl, and from that Tongue River. And the 5, they never wanted together again, so they sent Crazy Horse to the Red Cloud Agency, which would be Camp Robinson, Nebraska. The second one there was Touch the Cloud, the tall guy, and they sent him to Spotted Tail Agency, which became Rosebud. The third one was Dull Knife, or Morning Star from our family, and they sent him to, that's the whole Oklahoma, Indian Territory, coming back, Story, Cheyenne, Breakout, and then Hump, my grandfather, was the 4th one, and he went into Tongue River Cantonment to Miles. And then the 5th one was Lame Deer from our family. And in a blotched thing, he was killed south of Lame Deer, which there is his name. So with that was the end of our involvement, participation out here, our life out here. Reservations were now the 5 in South Dakota. You couldn't leave the reservation. And we had the 150th of the Fort Laramie Treaty. I was down there, and everybody was saying, yeah, treaty signer, family. So they said that. So where's the picture of your family that was here? And I said, you won't find Pump and Crazy Horse's name anywhere on that document. They would not sign. They came out to them, and they would not sign. So because of that, my great-great-grandfather, the son of Hump, had 13 more years of freedom. He eventually left Tongue River Cantonment and went to Canada with Sitting Bull until 1881, and then he had a second surrender and came in, and he chose the furthest away from the agency, our agency, Fort Bennett, and got in the most remote area. And I would say today that area has the most full-blood Lakota, has the most people that speak their Lakota language, people that know their ceremonies and Sundance, because Sundance was outlawed. See, it was underground, and they did it anyway. And so the man who became known as Bigfoot is from our family. That's Hump's cousin, first cousin. His real name was Spotted Elk. So most of the Wounded Knee people are a lot of them are from Cheyenne River, most of them. We have a community on our reservation called Tukini, and that means they come out alive. So, Black Elk even said the hoop of our nation is broken at Wounded Knee with all this disaster. And but the hoop can always be repaired and mended. So that's where we're at. We're mending our hoop that Black Elk talked about. And that's what the hoop dancer represents. Your hoops are spinning, everything's good, knife, and when it's broke, throw it down. But you can always put sinew on there and get them to spinning again. You do that by knowing your history and your culture and where you come from and family and these sites out here. All the while I drove over here, I was looking at all these sites. Some in my book, after Hump was killed, it's just showing he brought him in a travoy through here. And he's buried over in sight of Bear Latch, as are a lot of our people are over there. So we go by and we know these places where people were, like after Fetterman and over here. So it's a lot more than just archaeology, you know. And of course, like I said, Forest Service and those, as they call us when there's remains or something. But there's a lot more out there, and you know, and it's a big history, and I like it because that's how I got my name. Well, thank you, everybody.
Thanks, Donovan. Thanks, everybody, for coming. Remember, Pumpkin Buttes chapter of Wyoming Archeological Society, we meet on Wednesdays, first Wednesday of the month at Campbell County Public Library. Talking about field trips for this summer, potentially some places you can go out and help dig. So talk to Jessica. She can get you a membership form, and there's some posters back there as well. So if you're a student, find me. I've got your slips here. You don't get the extra credit without the slip, so don't go. Thanks, everybody. Have a good night.
Good night.
Thank you.